When it started here.
Okay, so I will start yet, but
Stand
anything?
by, yeah. I'll let you know what's going.
Okay, I want to start then.
Stand by. Okay, now.
Okay. Hello, good evening, everybody. And I'm going to get started right now. And let me just. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Bert Dicht, and on behalf of my colleague Larry Ahern, Vice President of Chapters, I would like to welcome you here to our Space Forum this evening, Student Visions of Space Settlement, the Roadmap to Space Student Art Contest. And I just had a glimpse of some of the artwork. It's very impressive. I think you're really going to enjoy tonight's Space Forum. As always, I'd like to go through the agenda, cover some virtual etiquette. We'll go through some NSS announcements. Then I'll talk about some upcoming space forums. We'll get right into our program, and then we'll close for the evening. So in terms of the virtual etiquette, like I always say, feel free to submit a question using the Q&A function. It's the best approach because that way we can go right to it and don't have to pick it out of the chat. But you are also very welcome to use the chat function. We only ask that you be respectful of the panelists and the audience. So thank you very much for that. We did get a number of questions, and they've been sent to the speaker. And hopefully we'll be able to get to as many as possible as we go through the presentation this evening. I always like to remind everyone to give to our cause. If you're enjoying programming like this, the space forums, the town halls, please donate to support NSS. We really appreciate all the support we get from our members and our donors, and I thank you in advance. And I will actually post this link into our chat so you can do that as well. But thanks again in advance for doing that. We've gotten a lot of donations in the past, and we look forward to your support in the future. And finally, complete the Space Forum survey at the end. It only takes a couple of minutes. The link will take you right there. The survey is anonymous. And as I've said before, it definitely helps us in terms of planning. You've given us some great ideas for future speakers that we're working on, and we appreciate all that feedback. So just take a couple of minutes to complete that survey. There we go. Today, I just wanted to remind everyone, today is NASA's Day of Remembrance. It honors the NASA family members who've lost their lives in the pursuit of exploration and discovery to benefit us all. It's held every year on the fourth Thursday of January, and it remembers the crews of Apollo 1, the Challenger crew, STS-51L, and the Columbia crew, STS-107. Remember, the Apollo 1 fire was January 27th, 1967. We lost Challenger on January 28th, 1986, and Columbia on February 1st, 2003. So today at the Kennedy Space Center, the Astronauts Memorial Foundation had a very special ceremony to remember all of the lost astronauts. I was mentioning to some of our colleagues beforehand how cold it was here in Florida. I know it's colder in a lot of other places, but it's around 44 degrees, and it was stormy. So they usually hold this ceremony outside at the Space Mirror, but today it was held inside at the Center for Space Education. And remarks from Kelvin Manning, who is now the acting director of the Kennedy Space Center, and Eileen Collins, Colonel Eileen Collins, USAF retired and a veteran of 4 shuttle missions, the first female commander of a space shuttle, and Tal Ramon, who is the son of Elon Ramon, who passed away on STS-107 Columbia, gave some remarks, and it was very, very moving. Then we all went out to the Space Mirror for the laying of the wreath, and I can tell you it's a moving feeling. We've got a couple of other ceremonies coming up over the weekend. On Sunday, the American Space Museum will do its tribute. And then on Monday, the Astronauts Memorial Foundation also does an event at Pad 34, where the Apollo 1 fire was. So a lot more celebration in terms of remembering these lost astronauts. And all of you, hopefully, take a moment to reflect on that as well. But it was a very somber and moving and inspirational day today. So let me just talk a little bit about a few NSS announcements, and I'm going to mention again, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about it. We've got the ISDC 2025 Together Beyond coming up in June. We actually sent out a invite to everybody. If you should have received that in your email. It's going to be at the Rosen Center in Orlando, June 19th to 22nd. An incredible list of speakers already. So I encourage everyone to register early. The early bird registration ends on April 15th. And hopefully you get that in. At the same time, you'll get your taxes in as well. So really, I do encourage you to register early and make your hotel reservations early. We're expecting a really big attendance this time around. Something new that I do want to share and possibly get your assistance. We are going to be doing a brand new session at ISDC. This one's called Rising Stars, Collegiate and Early Career Perspective. And it's going to be on the 20th, that Friday of the ISDC from 2 to 6 p.m. And the idea is to showcase the next generation of our space explorers and innovators. So it's a dedicated platform for college students and early career professionals to showcase their interests, their programs, their projects that they're having in space right now. To be eligible, you must be at least a part-time undergraduate, graduate, or technical trade institution student. Also, postdoctoral students are welcome, and early career professionals with less than 5 years of work experience. The format is a 15-minute presentation, 12 minutes to present, and 3 minutes for Q&A. And we are really encouraging both technical and non-technical presentations. As you're going to see tonight, space is not just about rockets and science and engineering. It's a lot more than that. Business, law, medicine, food, governance, ethics, the arts, every discipline needed to create a thriving spacefaring civilization. So if you know of a college student, an early career professional that might be interested, just reach out to me. We're going to be sending out the call for presentations very shortly and promoting this. And we got a couple months for people to put their abstracts in. So we're really hoping for a great track of presentations that will showcase what these amazing young people are doing today. So I encourage you to look into that and spread the word. And again, just reach out to me if there are any questions. And what's coming up with our space forums? We've got the next one will be in 2 weeks on February 6th. We have a Virgin Galactic private astronaut, Ron Rossano. And I met Ron at the Students for Exploration and Development of Space conference. And he really gave a great talk. He's actually also scheduled at some point to fly on New Shepard. And he was also scheduled to fly on Space Perspectives, which is the company that was making the balloons, but they've run into some financial trouble. So I don't know if that's what's going to happen with that. But he gives an interesting talk. He does a lot of work inspiring the next generation. And I think you're really going to enjoy his perspective of flying on Virgin Galactic. On February 20th, we've got a student team from Tufts University, their rocket team, and all the work they're doing. They've got a rocket program there. Again, I've met these students at the SEDS conference as well, and I think you'll really be impressed of their technical talent and professionalism. 1 week after that, February 27th, we've got Trey Carlson, who's the Kennedy Space Center Chief of Staff. Then on March 13th, we've got an NSS membership town hall. I am working to get an Axiom space engineer to join us, hopefully before the ISDC. And we also will be doing membership town hall, showcasing everything coming up with the ISDC as well, and working on a lot of other people. I know it takes us a little time to get things all settled. So thank you so much, and hopefully you'll be able to join us in one of these future events. So now, I'd like to, before going into the program, I would like to introduce our Director of Education, Francis Dellutri, who's just going to tell us a little bit about NSS education and this great contest that you're going to hear more about from our speaker. So Francis, let me just turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bert. As the Director of Education for the National Space Society, it has been a privilege to be involved with the activities of education. It's also known as space age education because we are trying to bring the very cutting edge part of what is happening in space to students, K through university. It's a pretty big order. And in doing that, we offer lots of different activities. We have the Space Edge Academy, which has lessons and courses on it for teachers, students, or general public to use. Right now it's free, just spaceedge.nss.org. And we also conduct contests. Some of these contests have been running for years, and they have quite a following with them. Some contests we work on to vary them a little bit each year, and I think that's what Jim Plaxco is going to be talking about here. And then some of them are brand spanking new. So we want to be letting people know that our purpose in that is to talk about convergent disciplines, like bringing art together with engineering, math, the humanities, governance, all those sort of things. And I think you'll see those in these fantastic renderings that these students have done for this contest. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and I'll turn it back to you, Bert.
Thank you so much, Francis. We appreciate that. And we are definitely looking forward to see some of this artwork. So let me share my screen one more time here before I turn it over to our guest speaker. So tonight, and again, I know a lot of you know our speaker tonight, Jim Plaxco. Jim has been a frequent guest on the Space Forums, both as a moderator and as a panelist. He is a digital artist and a computing professional and a longtime space advocate. He is president of the Chicago Society for Space Studies. He's a member of the NSS Board of Directors and also an NSS Space Ambassador. So we're really excited to have him showcasing some of this amazing artwork, and I know you're going to enjoy this. So let me stop my share, and Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Bert. So let me see how my sharing goes, and it looks like we're live. So great, welcome everyone to my review of the 2024 Roadmap to Space Student Art Contest. So most of my talk tonight is going to be all about the art that was submitted to the contest. And actually what I want to do is to use the students' art to speculate about our future in space and how it ties back into the art that was submitted by the students. So let me see if I can get this to advance. So what is the Roadmap to Space contest? Briefly, the contest started in 2013 with the idea being to get students to engage with the newly created NSS Milestones to Space Settlement document. We wanted to get them to read it, think about it, and then create artwork that illustrated one or the other of the milestones that were being discussed in the book. And it was just a wonderful way of making STEAM out of STEM. Now, I just want to take this opportunity to recognize our team of volunteers who made this year's contest, as well as previous year's contest, possible. We're all volunteers in this endeavor. So our volunteers put a lot of time in to making this contest a success. So thank you to everyone who is a member of the team. And I also want to acknowledge our contest co-sponsor, the SmallSat Education Conference, which is under the leadership of Kevin Simmons, who also happens to be a NSS Space Ambassador. And this was the second year of their co-sponsorship of the contest. And I want to give a special thanks to our special guest art judge, Brian Versteeg. Brian is a really great space artist, and I would like to encourage you to visit his website, spacehabs.com. So briefly, for the 2024 contest, the theme of the contest was our future in the space workforce. Now, I look at it like this. My daily life is dramatically different from that of my grandparents, and it's really pretty much all because of technology. So the question is, how will daily life be different for someone living on Mars, which will be composed not only of a very different set of technologies, but a radically different environment? So our student submissions were grouped into the 4 categories that you see on your screen here, and these categories are based on grade level. The student submissions also had a number of requirements that they were expected to meet, and so I will go into all of that later. And for the record, all of this information is available on the NSS website. Now, I did introduce one big risk to this year's contest, and that was to call for the addition of an entry fee requirement. And that was because of the unexpected success of last year's contest. We got almost 5,700 submissions, and every one of those had to be processed by our small team of volunteers. And frankly, we were really, stressed out trying to meet the deadlines that we had set for ourselves. So I pushed for the addition of an entry fee this year to try and discourage mass submissions by entire schools asking every student to submit artwork. And on that note, we did offer a waiver to any school that if they requested a waiver, they would be granted a free pass and not have to pay the submission fee. And related to the risk, of adding this new twist, I had been asked by another organization in 2024 to be a judge in their space art contest. And unfortunately for them, they got 0 entries in the contest. And so my concern about this year's contest was really getting, more extreme as weeks went by and we hadn't gotten any entries. But in the end, we got approximately 460 entries, and we wound up having to reject about 20 of those entries. Now, we did have a very nice array of prizes for the winning artwork, and all of which are detailed on the website. The top prize was the grand prize, and for that prize, the Small Sat Education Conference provided a $300 cash prize. For the other winning entries, NSS is turning that artwork into postcards, and those postcards are going to go on a suborbital flight aboard a Blue Origin rocket, and then the postcards will be returned to the students. The contest submission requirements I thought were quite straightforward. The most challenging had to do with specifying the artwork's subject matter. In spite of numerous admonitions about trying to be about being scientifically accurate and realistic, we still got submissions that did not respect physical reality. However, a number of these I wound up accepting into the contest because I felt bad about the students efforts going completely in vain. And at least accepting them into the contest, they would get a certificate of participation. And that was only for those that had less egregious errors. We also had a defined set of judging criteria that we art judges were expected to follow. And we did make a point of sharing these criteria with the students so that they would know exactly what the judges would be looking for in their submissions, and then they could create art accordingly. Now, we did get far fewer generative AI submissions this year, this being an example of one of them. And the ones we did get were really easy to spot. For the 2023 contest, we actually had several artworks for which the question, is it AI or not, were really tough to answer. And I believe this problem going forward is only going to get more challenging because the algorithms continue to be improved. And just for the record, I am a fan of AI generated art because I'm a fan of computer technology and programming. And it was computer art that got me interested in art in the first place. So tonight, I'm going to take you on a walk through, or let's say a thematic walk of some of the art that was submitted. And note, I'm not listing the students' names for privacy purposes, even though we do have parental waivers for all of them. But we've only gone public with the identities of the students who submitted winning artwork. Now, I was surprised at the number of entries we got that had agriculture as the subject. I thought this was great. The first thing that struck me about this particular artwork was, yes, agriculture is an energy-intensive industry, and the baseline per capita energy consumption is going to be quite high for anyone living off Earth. Now, another thing that struck me about this artwork was the number of people involved in this agricultural operation. For me, the question is, will it be realistic for space colonies to rely so heavily on human labor? My opinion is that we will need to rely on mechanization and automation, excuse me, uh, whenever and wherever possible, if we're to really be successful at space settlement. Another component has to do with system requirements, and that may be a challenge when it comes to the variety of food crops that are grown. And when I'm thinking in terms of system requirements, I'm speaking in terms of the systems that will support a specific set of environmental conditions in which different plants thrive. So the one thing I don't see in this picture that makes me wonder where is the coffee growing chamber? Because if I'm going to be living on another planet, I would still like to have my morning coffee. Which leads to another consideration, and that will be the amount of agricultural system adaptation that has to be done for each settlement type. After all, a colony on the surface of Mars is in a different environmental situation than is a lunar colony or an O'Neill colony. So it becomes a question of how adaptable are these different agricultural systems to these different environments. And I was pleased to say that there are several submissions dealing with asteroid mining. And while this was my favorite of these images, I don't see it as practical to use a human workforce for mining operations. And in this particular image, I can see several astronauts. And I just don't think that's going to be realistic. In fact, with mining operations here on the Earth, there's already a big push forward on automation because the cost of human labor represents a significant fraction of the total cost of production. So I would say that that is going to be even more important when it comes to any type of space-based mining or manufacturing. Now, Brian Versteeg and I did get a chuckle over this artwork because soon as we saw it, we knew instantly that it was based on an artwork that he had created and which he still has up on his website. So for me, images like this were good because they raised the question of what sort of asteroid mining approach will wind up becoming the preferred optimal method, or will there even be such a thing as an optimal method? And another of the submissions, again, is based on an artwork that Brian created. Now, I like this one because it illustrates the concept of mining, processing, and manufacturing operations all being co-located. So the question you can ask is, if you want to have a facility on asteroid X, do you deliver a prefabricated facility to the location, or do you send the infrastructure that you would need to then build a facility on site? So I'm certain that, early on, the prefabricated approach will be the better solution. But wouldn't it be great if our technology advances to the point where scenarios like we see here in this artwork become practical? Now, I was glad to see that we had some art that had communications as a theme. Now, assuming this mom looks like she's on the moon, and assuming her kids are back there on Earth, real-time communications is still possible. But what if she was somewhere more distant? In today's world, we really do rely heavily on real-time communications. And how well is this going to work across the expanses of space? And then there is also the challenge of bandwidth. The amount of information that we transmit today from place to place has exploded in the last century. And as our presence in space grows, so will the demands for bandwidth. And I would expect that on a per person basis, those bandwidth demands will be much higher than they are today. And of course, tied in with our ability to communicate is our ability to move around, and that means a transportation system or infrastructure. So you can ask yourself, how will individuals go about getting from one location to another, whether it's within a miles long O'Neill space colony or within a smaller lunar base, or moving from one base to another base? Now, this is an example of an artwork that was rejected due to its non-realistic nature, specifically cars driving between planets. But this artwork does present an interesting concept, and that is of a network of transportation connections. Now, if you think about globalization, one of the key factors in the success of globalization has been a combination of containerization with port automation, which makes it possible to cheaply transport large volumes of goods into a global market, which then allows manufacturers to more fully benefit from economies of scale. So how is this going to play out once we have people living on the moon in O'Neill colonies and on Mars. I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that if we rely on chemical propulsion, we're never going to open up the solar system really to human settlement because of the limitations of chemical propulsion. Now, when it comes to moving out of a gravity well, there is the prospect of using space elevators. But I'm of the opinion that the technology for this form of transportation has a long way to go. But when it comes to supply chain simplicity, Earth orbiting space settlements are best positioned to benefit from Earth's overwhelming productive capacity. I mean, you're less than 1 day away. So I think our supply chain, even with chemical rockets, will be able to support uh, settlements in cislunar space. Now, for my part, I've always wondered about the practicalities of some of the orbital colony designs, which seem focused on making a space colony look very naturalistic and inviting, um, which in my mind calls to question the balancing of aesthetics with engineering practicality. So, this actually gets down to a fundamental question of how much of Mother Nature do we take with us and how much do we have to leave behind? Now, we did get a large number of submissions that showed people just doing things in their daily life, which led me to really think about what is going to be the nature of daily life from a familial perspective. So I see the basic question as being what will be the impact on the human psyche of living in a totally new environment with very new technologies. Now, when I first saw this artwork in reviewing it for submission, the first thing that came into my mind was that this was a cross between the Hayden Planetarium and the Guggenheim Museum, which made me stop and think about how long is it going to be before someplace other than Earth is home to a large museum. I mean, I still have childhood memories of family trips to museums. Now, when will there be a museum on the moon? Which led me to wonder, what if somebody builds a museum on the moon that encompasses the Apollo 11 landing site? Is that going to be a good thing or not? I wonder. I really liked this question of the girl on the swing because it really got me to wondering about how will children spend their time on this new frontier? How will their experiences shape their development? And I was frankly surprised at the number of artworks that were submitted that dealt with education. I was also a little bit surprised that all of them incorporated robotic technology into the classroom. Now, the concept itself is not really a surprise, with AI computer-based learning systems being seen as viable alternatives to human teachers. And if you think about it, if you think about the number of children that are living in a small colony, we could well see a return to the concept of the one-room schoolhouse. And we did have, fortunately, several submissions that dealt with healthcare. And this is going to be a particular challenge when you stop to consider the sophistication, the specialization, and the infrastructure that exists today for our healthcare system. And it's pretty important to note that it's one thing to provide short-term medical support for a population that's been medically screened for a short-term mission to space, but it is something entirely different to be able to handle a large, diverse population of all ages. And this image kind of made me think about Herta, which is actually an island of the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. It had been populated for thousands of years, and the island had always had a subsistence economy and never more than a couple hundred people living on the island. And surprisingly enough, the mainstay of their diet was the birds that lived on the island. And it was in 1930 that the last 30 or so people living on the island petitioned the Scottish government to relocate them to the mainland because as communications improved, and as there was more frequent visits to the island from mainland Scots, they could see how much poorer their quality of life was. And technically, yeah, this image should have probably been rejected from the contest, but it was such a fun image, I let it slide in. And this image also happens to be the closest thing to an athletic activity that was submitted. So, even though a significant amount of time is going to get spent supporting the infrastructure required to keep space colonists alive, people still need to find a physical activity they can use to relieve their stress. And for me, I'd be interested to see what types of new sports are developed that are suitable to the local environment. And I think everyone agrees that it's a certainty that we will be mining the moon for its resources. I see it primarily as being mining to support other off-Earth activities. And there has been much made about mining the moon for helium-3. And I'm fairly certain that this image is based on one of those illustrations. However, it does remain to be seen how realistic this proposition is. After all, fusion still seems to be quite a ways off. Now, when it comes down to using space to provide energy back to Earth, the only two products that I'm aware of are one, lunar helium-3 as a fuel for fusion reactors, and two, space solar power via solar power satellites. And I have to say, I was pretty disappointed that we did not get any space solar power related submissions either this year or last year. So this makes me think that, okay, this information is not getting out there. Now, we did get one submission picturing the impact hazard posed by asteroids and comets. And I view this as implying that there is some sense of awareness of the existence of this particular problem. So doing space settlement, space solar power, lunar bases, space shields, these are all examples of mega projects that will consume large amounts of resource. And for this to work and for an extensive space-based infrastructure to get built, I think the core features of globalization are going to have to be extended into the space sphere. And I would characterize the key features as being transportation, communication, integration, transparency, capital movement, and the rule of law so people know what to expect. And I will argue that in order for this future to become more likely, it is going to require great strides forward in our robotic related technologies. Specifically, I'm thinking in terms of sensors, appendages, actuators, dexterity, communications, as well as the algorithms that are going to drive all of this in order to better integrate robots with their environment. And I will say that the experience and knowledge we will gain by undertaking these difficult endeavors will be a big benefit to everyone here on Earth, and that should not get lost. And I would also say that the benefits, particularly for us here on Earth, will be largely, I think, due to the experience we gain by crafting solutions to the problems people will face in order to survive on the new frontier. And now it's back to the contest itself. I'm going to quickly go through the winning entries and how we arrived at them. Judging consisted of a two-step process. Step one was to do an initial screening and do a down select to about 50 or so of the best images. This year we wound up picking about 80 best images. Step two was to then do the final judging for grand prize, first prize, and honorable mention. And for the record, I was the only person involved in both phases of the judging, which could have influenced my perceptions of the art. But I was very pleased that Brian and I were in pretty much unanimous agreement on every one of the artworks that we reviewed. So that was comforting to me. And also, just a reminder, the rules of the contest said that we did not have to give out any prizes at all. We had the flexibility of not awarding prizes if we did not feel that the artwork was of sufficient quality. But we quite enjoyed the artwork and very much appreciated the efforts of the students who took so much time to create their art and submit it to the contest. And this is our grand prize artwork, Lunar Descent, the Astral Spiral Quest by Kavanagh. Surprisingly, a seventh grader, the youngest age group of the four groups in the contest. We really liked the style of the artwork. It had this retro space feel to it. It was a strong composition. The colors worked together. It was well laid out. And so we did not have a hard time deciding that this would be the grand prize artwork. Now, in that same age group, the grades 5 through 8, we picked this as one of the first prize winners. And this is Frontiers of the Universe. And I'll tell you, we did hem and haw a little bit about this one because of that spaceship that's up there in the sky. We saw it as something of a distraction, but we really did like the three astronauts a lot. And so for that reason, we gave Frontier of the Universe a first prize. And the other first prize we gave out for grades 5 through 8 was My Family Space Tour. We really liked the subject of the artwork and the technique the student used to create it. And for us, thinking about it, the My Family Space Tour really does capture the idea of space settlement as being about ordinary people living in this extraordinary environment. Our first prize that we gave out for grades 9 through 12 was Dome of Dreams, Space Colony Innovation. We liked the complexity of the work, the subject, the colors, the technique. they all combined to make this the best in this age group category. For university undergraduate, we gave a first prize to Cosmic Classroom, Learning Among the Stars. Now, personally, for me, this was my first choice initially for the grand prize winner. I saw this and I just fell in love with it. But in comparing side by side, this one with the eventual grand prize winner, the other one did speak space to us more strongly than this one did. But personally, I really like what the artist has captured in this piece. For the university graduate level, we gave out two first prizes. This one, Cosmic Briefing. Again, the subject, the composition, and the general impression it created. For me, I was thinking of one of the scenes from Star Wars when I saw this, rightly or wrongly. And this is the other first prize we gave out for the graduate group. And this is more of a traditional space artwork and research on water resources. So we did like the theme of the art as well. And we also gave out a number of honorable mentions. And now all of the prize-winning artwork, grand prize, first prize, honorable mentions, they can all be seen in the gallery of winners on the NSS website. And in addition to the artwork, we also have the students' description of their artwork, as well as their description of how they created their artwork. So you should go and check that out. And for the first time ever, we created an ebook detailing the contest and showing all of the art that was accepted into the contest. Altogether, it's 53 pages. And this was something I had proposed that we do as a way to provide an added degree of recognition to the students and the art that they submitted to the contest. And now, just as with the awarding of prizes being provisional, the creation of this ebook was also provisional on us receiving a sufficient number of entries in the contest and awarding a sufficient number of prizes. And fortunately, we had no problem on that count. So the book is in PDF format, and it actually conforms to both Amazon's and Lulu's 6x9 print on demand requirements. Here are all the links that are associated with the contest. The NSS blog post is a short post that I wrote at the conclusion of the contest. The extended article is a longer piece that I put on my own website about my experiences with the contest. And I believe that Bert is probably going to be sharing these links with you in the follow-up email that gets sent out about this evening's webinar. And lastly, while my talk here tonight was done based on my role as the contest's operation manager and ebook creator, I am also a NSS Space Ambassador. And Space Ambassadors is an NSS outreach program in which certified ambassadors offer a variety of space-related presentations. So if you represent a group looking for such a presentation, or if you're a member of such a group, please visit our corner of the NSS website to learn about how you can book us to be a speaker for your group, your organization, or your school. And that concludes my discussion of the 2024 Roadmap to Space Student Art Contest. So at this point, I will be happy to do my best to answer your questions. So Bert, would you prefer that I stop sharing my
Yeah,
screen?
if you could, Jim, I'll definitely send out the links, but someone asked if you might be able to just drop them in real quick to the chat.
Uh,
I don't know if
is
you have to do that.
I can drop them in the chat, but I'm not sure if anyone will be able to copy text out of the chat. That might not be enabled.
Right, right.
That is a challenge.
I'll definitely send out the links, everybody, if we can't get them into the chat or you can't copy them, and we'll make sure you have access to them because they are fabulous. So we definitely want to do that. So yeah, why don't we do some questions, Jim? I thought that was fascinating, visually stimulating. The artwork was just tremendous. Let me ask a question. You as an artist and also someone immersed in space as well. I was impressed with some of these students' ability, their not just their art talent, but their creativity and knowledge to make these representative of something realistic. Is that something, I'm impressed with that. Is that something you expected? And you know, when the students are sharing how they created it, are they talking about some of those things?
We don't give them a lot of space on the submission form with which to go into detail. And this is a key reason as to why we have 4 different submission categories, because we will have different levels of expectation. After all, we expect a university graduate student working on a master's degree to have a much more broad and deeper knowledge of the subject than
Right.
someone who is in 5th grade. So, that's why I said it was surprising that it was someone from the youngest grade category that won the grand prize, and that was because of the simplicity in terms of messaging. They had a simple, straightforward message of a couple of astronauts at work. And of course, the quality of the work was really well done.
Oh, absolutely.
So I guess I'm more surprised by the variety of what we see within sets of age groups. So we do expect to see different levels of, let's say, sophistication from one grade group to the next grade group to the next grade group. But it's a little bit surprising to see the differentiation that exists within a single grading group.
Right. No, just fascinating. Is there anything that, I mean, you talked a lot about your impressions, but is there anything maybe that surprised you most about the artwork that was submitted?
Actually, not so much about what was submitted, but about how it was created. 2 things. One, the artwork was overwhelmingly done in a traditional format. Now, the students were free to use a digital format, so they could have used Photoshop or Krita or GIMP or something to paint the image. I was surprised, or they could have used the 3D graphic software. I was surprised to not see any of that. And the other thing that surprised me, and maybe this is because things go in phases. There were several years ago, judging in our contest, we were overwhelmed by the number of entries that came in that were done in the anime style. And yet, this year's contest, and I think this is true for last year's contest too, there was nothing anime in terms of the style. So I don't know if that style has gone out of favor, or if that particular age group that was most, I'll say, fixated on that style has moved on. They've graduated school and now they've got jobs, you know. So those were for me the two main surprises with respect to the nature of the art submissions.
Right, right. No, very, very good. A number of people asked about the objective of this contest, and maybe you could comment on that, where, you know, how you see it impacting students, and I can also ask Francis to maybe comment on that as well.
Yeah, it's really to get, you know, we obviously see space as being the development of space as being a big positive for the human race. Uh, but we don't know about the level of awareness of, you know, the arguments in favor, you know, in how important space is already to our lives. So by doing this contest, um, and spreading it out to classrooms across the world, we're hoping that in the course of investigating to create artwork, students and their teachers will learn something new about how space impacts our daily lives today and about the potential that it holds for our future. I think it's also a good way of getting students to translate something they've read into a book into an image that they have to create on a piece of paper or on a computer screen. There's that mental translation process that goes on, which I think builds a more nimble mind.
Right. Francis, anything to add on that?
I think Jim really defined it quite well. The only thing I would say to add to what Jim has said, which was marvelous, is that part of what the contest involved with NSS is an eye on career readiness. And when we think of that, it's really using all parts of who students are, all their interests and abilities and talents, etc. And we know that there is expected to be quite a deficiency in the workforce in the next 20 years. And so the importance of having a way to sustain what we're trying to do in space is very, very important. But also, is, as Jim mentioned, the wonder of what these journeys and experiences of creating some kind of a bridge from what we have today to what could be in the future is a marvelous way to engage students, but also to use a part of their creativity that sometimes gets a little lost when many schools are using screens and things like that, and there's not that opportunity to really press themselves to think of what could be in the future. So I think, as Jim said so beautifully, it pulls all of this in together, and that's really what education's about at NSS. Thank you, Gert.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jim, a couple questions from Carl asking.
Hello, Carl.
Carl, there's no shortage of questions from Carl, but he asked about how you make the determination about who actually did the artwork, that it was done by the submitter. And then he also said, could you share a sample of your own artwork?
Oh, for my artwork, you can go to www.artsnova.com. And the link, you'll be on the website if you go read the extended article about the roadmap contest. So we are taking it, I guess, on faith that the person who filled out the form and paid the entry fee is indeed the person who created the artwork that is being submitted, since they do have it in their possession.
Right. No, absolutely. I see an interesting question from Jolie. Do you think there is a large representation of human labor because students connect personally to space and want to be part of the exploration? They might not see themselves as being part of the exploration team if it's a few humans and a bunch of robots. Interesting perspective.
Pretty astute perspective. I'll tell you a little story of an experience of my own. I had the opportunity last century of serving as a tour guide on the pair of tractor trailers that Boeing was sending around as space station mock-ups. And so they were on exhibit at the Chicago Adler Planetarium. And I was one of the volunteers taking people through the two trailers. One trailer was a mock-up of the habitation module. The other trailer was a mock-up of the laboratory module. So taking people through, there was a great deal of interest, and as exhibited by the number of questions I was peppered with, about the habitation module, because people could relate to eating in space, bathing, sleeping. These are all things that they did in their everyday life. It was relatable. But you would get them into the laboratory module. No, I don't think I ever got a question in the lab module. Their eyes would kind of glaze over and they would nod their head just as you're doing now. And so if you think about it, I mean, growing up, I was influenced by science fiction and space art, and I wanted to see myself standing on the surface of Mars or doing a spacewalk. So it's something I think that's innately human, that we crave to be participants in these things. So yes, I'm sure that's why, but I was very pleased to see a number of the submitted artworks that gave robots prominence. In fact, remember I was talking about healthcare. I only showed one healthcare image, and that was of a doctor taking care of a person. But there were a couple images as well of a doctor taking care of a robot. So because they will need maintenance, just as we do. So it is important to consider, the relevance of their presence in these environments. And there were a number of submissions that featured human robotic interactions. So the kids seem to be pretty aware of that.
Yeah, it's impressive, their insight at such a young age. A couple questions that I see from Boris and Sadia related to the entries. You had a lot of winners from India and entries from India. So I'm going to read the two questions together and see if we can address them. Boris asks, it appears there are lots of submissions from India. Do you have some basic stats by country, age, gender, for example? And then Sadia's question about the entries from India, do you think that might have influenced the style? Because there was certainly lots of color from those entries. And who knows if that has a factor in it.
Now that's a very good observation, is the fact that overwhelmingly all our entries this year did come from India, which is surprising because, to a student in India, $6 is a very pricey entrance fee. So that really was, I would say, a significant sacrifice on their part. So, but that's a good point, that maybe because so many came from India and the nature of the schools that would be participating, that maybe there's something with the teaching methodology. behind why, we didn't see any anime. But then again, maybe anime has fallen out of favor because it's no longer a new thing. 15 years ago, anime was the new kid on the block. And, humans, we just love the new thing on the block. So, but
I
we do
just-
have the stats, and overwhelmingly our entries this year did come from India. Yes.
I just wanted to point out that in most of our contests for K through university, they are Indian applicants. And I've spoken to the Indian students as well as their teachers. And in India, right now, and for quite some years, space is the most exciting thing in the world. And so their schools are really embracing space and what it can bring to the country of India. That's different than in the US. The US space has been around for a long, long time, and it's not as exciting and new and fresh. And the possibilities of finding employment in the space industry for so many in the US feels like it's untouchable. It's just not possible. So I think with the Indian students and schools and teachers, there is a feeling that the grasp is there. And so they promote the contests quite a bit more than some other countries. That's been our finding.
No, I think you're right, Francis, because India is they were a great space program, and next year they do hope to have astronauts in space.
Right.
So you're right. I can see how the kids there are really excited about it, and they are very aware, and it's again I'm impressed. A question from Kerry asked about related to the winners mostly being from one country. But how was the quality from other countries, Jim? And she was curious about how we can encourage students to put forth quality work.
This year, because it was so dominated by submissions from India, it's impossible to pass any type of valid judgment. We have had different balances in previous contests. So if you go to the NSS website and you can go back through the galleries of winners from previous contests and see, and we've had a number from Europe that have won. One of the artworks that I used as a backdrop in my slides was an American college student. She was a student studying medical illustration, and she just did a absolutely beautiful painting of a family with their newborn, in a space colony. So it does tend to vary from one year to the next, the range of artworks we get, and the balance between countries that we get. But India's always been a consistently good performer. I will say that.
And a question from Dave. Did any of the submissions show evidence on the part of the students that they understand that systems and technologies intended for space settlements can be used and may be necessary to address issues here on Earth?
For my part, I did not observe that. And I think that's probably a level of detail that, is just not going to come across, given the nature of the contest and the students doing the submissions. The university and graduate levels, we did not get nearly as many submissions from. So I would say for my part, I didn't observe anything.
A couple questions that were submitted beforehand, and I saw some that Carl asked about the judging. Yeah, how many overall judges did you have? And what other qualifications to be a judge in case someone is interested in maybe helping you out in the future?
Yeah. As I said, it was a two-step process. So step one was doing the initial pass. And there were three of us involved in that. We saved Brian Versteeg because of, demands on his time. We saved him for the final round of judging. And we've had varying numbers of judges in past contests. And sometimes adding more judges actually creates much more work because you now have more opinions that are being expressed. And so it can be more difficult to come to a consensus. So I would say that, pardon me, I would say that, two judges is the minimum you want to go with because you do want to have that dialogue. As I say, I had art that I thought I was good, but can I trust my own opinion? Well, no, and it was the same thing last year working with Stanley, who's also a professional artist as a judge. When you see your opinion being reflected back at you from the other person, knowing that you have two very different backgrounds, two different skill levels, but you're coming to the same conclusions, that's very reassuring that you're making the right decision.
Makes sense. Absolutely, Jim. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about maybe where the contest is going. It's been around for a few years now. You've made some adjustments, and maybe you and Francis can talk a little bit about that because it certainly has a strong place right now within NSS and space education.
It says I was operations manager, but that was more of a tactical type of thing. So if you want to talk to somebody about planning out strategy, you need to talk to Francis.
Okay. You make it happen, right?
In
That's
part,
right.
only in part.
Yes, Jim's very, very integral for the program. Right now, we are considering a different a little bit different avenue to take that will involve a lot of different things. We're not ready to launch that yet. We're looking for, I believe, a February 21st launch of that. I don't know if Jim even knows very much about it, but I'm excited about it. It will be encompassing lots of different types of art, not necessarily the visual art, but other arts is what the plan is. So we're excited about that, and stay tuned. Should be coming out soon.
Great. We look forward to that. Jim, you mentioned that there were no submissions for space solar power. I saw a comment that came in that they would, the Space Solar Power Institute would maybe like to fund a space solar power construction operations art competition. Maybe we could connect them with you guys and see what we can do to encourage in the future some art for space solar power.
That would be, given the imminent creation of a space solar power study by the NSS, I think that would be a perfect tie-in. Going back to the origin of this contest, it was to, engage students and teachers with our milestones through space settlement document to say, okay, students, here are challenges. How would you go about illustrating, this challenge? Take the challenge, you want to illustrate it, make an artwork and submit it to the contest. So, and given, the nearer term practicality of SPS, I would say we're kind of, overdue for an SPS demo flight.
Right. Sounds good. I just want to touch on, we're just about out of time, and you mentioned about AI. I talked about this Rising Stars competition or session that we're going to be doing at the ISDC, and we made a decision to allow AI to be used in helping people develop the presentation. But we talked about criteria, transparency, You have to announce it, and it's not to be used to do the work for you. It's meant to be designed to assist you. You know, I've tested out the AI in creating images, and I've been disappointed in what I've seen because I was just trying to do some things to highlight some of the presentations that I do.
Yeah.
Is there right now at the state of the AI? Is there a trick to helping to get the right images? Because I know you mentioned some things are easy to spot. When I put in an image about showing space exploration, what doesn't matter which platform I'm using, they always show me variations of space shuttles, which is old.
Now remember, you can, if you think of the concept of a weighted average,
Right.
At the heart of large language models is simply a linear equation of the form y equals mx plus b. That's your starting point. Now, how many variables do you have in that equation? 2.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
I was talking to my son about this. I says, okay, you got a degree in chemical engineering. What was the most complex equation you ever worked with? How many variables? He's like, somewhere in the teens. And I'm like,
Right.
okay. Where it gets tricky is basically when you're talking about these large language models, you're talking about an equation with billions of parameters. And it's sampling on a very large data set. So you have lots and lots and lots of shuttle pictures out there. And
Okay.
so you are going to get results that are kind of skewed in that direction. So you have to avoid like what they call one-shot prompting, and build up with prompts. And different tools do allow you different degrees of manipulation of your prompt. Like you could say, okay, using the previous image as a base, do that. So I like it. It's interesting.
Right.
For me, the fascination is with, the process. But in terms of practical use, I find using generative AI for either writing code or generating ideas. Like if I'm going to do a talk about a space art contest, what would be the key points to make? And oh yeah, here's a idea that I hadn't thought of. So I encourage people to use AI, but to use it wisely in terms of a source of ideas that you can build on, and don't just do a copy paste of what the AI says back to you.
Right. No, good advice. Well, Jim, thank you so much.
Bert, if I could, there's
Sure.
one
Go ahead,
interesting
Francis.
question here. No. One interesting question from Penjanti. He's interested in, you had mentioned before about the student talks about how they generated their art.
Yes.
Is there also a description in what this means or some interpretation of the art? And he's asking how many pages are required for that or anticipated for that, of that explanation?
And go ahead, Jim.
No, which are you asking about, the roadmap contest or?
Yes.
Oh, not pages. It's in terms of like a paragraph. Now that may be something that's changed in the future, maybe expanding on the descriptive component about what the artwork is the concept that the artwork is portraying. And maybe we can expand on, the amount of space given to the techniques used. But typically, it doesn't take a lot to say, I used watercolor on such and such type of paper, or I used Photoshop, to create this artwork. Yeah, and of course, now it gets tricky with Photoshop because Photoshop now has a built-in AI of its own that can be used for generating content. So but for us, it's not that we don't have anything against, AI or using AI, but for this particular contest, we wanted to see what the student themselves
Right.
could do, on their own. And that's why we also, for artists who would be working with a 3D package like Blender, they were not allowed to use any, I'll say commercial or free 3D assets. They could not go out and get someone else's space station, plop it into their 3D scene, and then say they created it. So we didn't just ban generative AI. We banned 3D assets as well, because that makes it too easy.
Great. Thanks, Francis. I missed that question, so glad you were able to find that. Well, very good, Jim. As we close out, any final thoughts on the contest and where you hope to see it go, possibly?
Well, I hate to say I want to see more entries, because that means I have to spend more time. But it is reassuring and satisfying to have a larger number of entries. So next year, I'd like to see 1,000 entries in the contest. And I'd ask people, NSS just does not just do art contests. We have a variety of contests, and I would suggest that people check the website. If you're not members, check back with the website often, or better yet, join NSS, be a member, and then you'll be kept abreast of all these things.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. Francis, any final comments from you?
No, I just appreciate being here, and fantastic work there, Jim. I love how you tell the story of what it took to put this together and to come up with those decisions. And I am very impressed by the art that you showed and how you did that. So thank you very much for this. And I love the questions that were asked. They're very different ideas that are moving around people's heads, and I just love that.
Thank you, Francis. And I will second that, Jim. I think it was very educational the way you shared the artwork and then gave your own impressions and what you thought was behind those, and brought that into the context of space settlement. So we really appreciate that. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the artwork, and I'm going to download that ebook. I hadn't done that. So, but I did see one last question, Jim.
Sure.
Someone asked, are we going to do any plans to exhibit the winning artwork beyond the ebook, such as museums or other conferences? Is there maybe either of you could address that?
We did point out that is a possibility, but at the time we established the contest, there was no certainty as to whether or not we would actually be able to do that. And so I am not aware at this time if there's been any change in the status, with respect to exhibiting at conferences.
I think that's something we're constantly looking for, is an opportunity to showcase what we have. It's just the format of how to do that and how to choose what you're going to do. So I think that certainly is something that's on the table and we're talking about.
Very good. Well, thank you both. We really appreciate it. Let me go and share my screen one last time as we work to close out this evening. Oops, what happened there? That wasn't supposed to happen. There we go. And again, I do want to thank Jim Plaxco for a really informative, fun, and visually stimulating Space Forum this evening. So Jim, thank you again. Thank you, Francis, for all of your work on Space Edge and putting these contests together. And we look forward to seeing where they go and using them to inspire that next generation. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Fred Becker, again, for doing all the tech behind our Space Forums. And over the next several weeks, I'm going to introduce, we have two colleagues who've joined us this evening, Sadia Ahmad and Stephanie Erickson, and they are going to be assisting me in the future with helping to organize and put on the space forums and town halls. So you'll be hearing more about them as we go forward. So Stephanie and Sadia, thank you so much for being part tonight. So everybody, thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate taking time out of your busy schedules. So hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to the next Space Forum, which will be in 2 weeks. Again, we're having that private astronaut from Virgin Galactic. I know you're going to enjoy that as well. So take a look in your emails for the invites. For those of you who attended, if you're in today's time zones, have a great evening. If you're in tomorrow's time zones, have a great day. And be safe, everybody. Have a great weekend. So with that, I'm just going to say good night and thank you again. We'll see you in 2 weeks.